Welcome to the first House of Commoners podcast with me, Issa, and Ryan. We're going to talk about everything to do with UK politics, and well, obviously, what a week, Ryan. The US elections have wrapped up, and America has decided to go with Donald Trump.
Yes, very, very interestingly. Certainly the political story of the year, even counting Brexit and all that kind of stuff as well. Looking forward to having a chat, seeing what we can analyse, discuss, and hopefully provide some sort of insight.
Exactly, yeah. I think the main reason we're doing this podcast is because of the overall poor quality of good conversation about politics, which tries to angle the science and the art of campaigning and politics and the numerous things that go into these political campaigns. So hopefully you guys can get a bit out of that.
I know. I love how you said poor quality, and it's like our first podcast, and never know.
Well, I think it's just, I don't know. Obviously, I fully expect this to be exactly. No, I'm expecting it to be a car crash, but I think there's a desire. There's maybe a demand for a conversation that goes further than the opposition are. And, all these libtards aren't that funny. And then Donald Trump's a racist. And, which, it's just, I don't think it's, I don't think it adds very much.
Yeah, if I at any point just go like, oh, yeah, Donald Trump's a racist, don't be afraid to put me down, because I know that's not the kind of discourse we want.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that's not true, for that matter, but... I just don't think it adds anything to the conversation, to be fair. So, or the public conversation. Obviously, I think the main story for anybody who's really into the political campaigning aspect of this election is the extent the polls got it wrong, and I just wanted to get your view on it initially, on why you think the polls got it so wrong.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because I remember after our election in the UK in 2015, there was a lot of public backlash against pollsters and the polling companies, just because people have felt they'd got it so wildly wrong. They'd almost lied and cheated out of their expected result. And to a certain degree, that's almost what we've been seeing in America. I remember during the course of the election campaign, seeing various statistical models. So we were talking, I know you and I had conversations about 538 and things like that. And one of the things I actually found really interesting is that I read this article on the Huffington Post. A sort of like a bastion of solid analysis, of course. Sorry, I actually have nothing against Huffington Post. I just thought.
No, neither I necessarily. I guess there's just some of the drivel sometimes that comes out of there.
Ooh, Issa. But in this article, it essentially criticised 538 and Nate Silver for using t-distributions in his statistical modelling. And what essentially that means...
Do you just want to explain what that is? Yeah.
Well, I should say, my political science knowledge is relatively limited, despite doing, a degree in it. But a t-distribution essentially is the idea that in your sample, in your population, in the thing you're measuring, it accounts for more variation in what you see. So things you usually get polled like margin of error, things like that. Well, in a t-distribution, it has what's known as fatter tails, and basically means that it's more likely that some of your data will be in the extremes. So when you apply this to polling, it gives this sort of conservative conservative estimate about the polling, and for instance gave Donald Trump a 40% chance to win. Now, a lot of people criticised that, and in fact one of the models that ran completely antithetical to that was the New York Times model. And that, I remember at one point, was giving Hillary Clinton a chance of 95% to win, something like that. Which I suppose, one of those easy things in hindsight is to say, like, how on earth was that happening? So definitely, there's a real problem in the sort of the assumptions quite a lot of these polling companies, these media companies took in their approach to maybe gathering the data, perhaps interpreting it. I think you and I probably both agree something here went very, very wrong indeed. I know a lot of people would say that you got to account for margin error and things like that, but it was really quite in favour of Hillary Clinton to win, and they just didn't account for Donald Trump's victories in the Rust Belt states. Was one major problem, for instance.
I guess to make that argument, I mean, if let's just say I'm defending the pollsters here currently. So recently I just read the 538s. Basically, I guess their defence for, stating why they were, in fact, clearly going for a Hillary Clinton victory. And the argument they made, whilst also implying in some ways that they actually were giving Trump a greater chance than people assume, which, to be fair to them, they did. They had Trump had a 35% chance and Clinton had a 65% chance by the end of it.
I remember seeing that, yeah.
Exactly. And they also made the argument, basically, that it was in the margin of errors. Just, if you are going to look at the Electoral College, that margin of difference is everything, because once you win a state, then those points are instantly switched over into the Electoral College. So, in a lot of those states, the end result was actually, if you go state from state, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, all these states, Trump didn't destroy Clinton in any of these states. It was actually a quite close race. 100,000 individuals kind of made up the difference here in each state. And they argued, basically, that if you do go into these states and change the score 1 or 2% either way, Clinton wins them. In fact, they actually did that analysis and showed that if 1% in these swing states, if Clinton had upped her vote by 1%, she would have won those states. And she would have had an electoral college that looked something like 308 Clinton votes. And I think basically the kind of score everybody was expecting.
Yes.
So I guess to defend them, this was in some ways in the margin of error. So I guess we could probably maybe defend the polls a bit there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think we shouldn't be too rash to say this was an utter catastrophe. But I suppose my personal opinion is that something did go wrong here. Now I remember listening to a podcast or the NPR politics podcast. And I remember they had a pollster on, and what she was essentially saying is that, do you remember the 2015 election? You remember Brexit, and she was essentially saying how American pollsters had much more financial resources in order to conduct more accurate polling. She was almost saying don't worry too much about what the Brits have done because we can do better. And I sort of, on the one hand, was a bit aggrieved by that. I felt like a certain sense of national dishonor. I can't believe she's just said that. But after the election result, I thought back about it, and I sort of went, well, you got it just as wrong as a lot of people in for instance the referendum did. In the Brexit referendum, the polling was essentially 44-44, or maybe 47-47. I can't remember, but it was relatively even. If you just looked at the polls, you'd have no idea who was going to win. But there must have been some sort of error in the polling or in the sampling, and the pollsters did. Because if you compare the results, for instance, from Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, there was a big shift towards Donald Trump, and he carried those states. Maybe not convincingly, but certainly enough to get him over the line, obviously. And the pollsters missed that because there was a sort of, Clinton often had I don't know what it was in Michigan, a sort of 4-point lead, 5-point lead. Again in Wisconsin, sort of 2 or 3. And consistently they put her ahead, and they failed to, for whatever reason, to be able to actually measure the outcome of those states, even though sort of demographically people have been thinking maybe these could flip, and obviously Donald Trump himself knew that there was something on there. Otherwise, he wouldn't have spent his last 3 days campaigning there.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I also think that I guess maybe this is pressing on to an issue we'll talk about later, but that both Brexit and Donald Trump have been really from central, I guess, the media, and if you want to call them liberal, I guess you can, and if you want to call them sensationalist, and driven by a capitalist desire to only talk about the topics that get them views and clicks. Donald Trump and Brexit have been in the views of everybody leading up to those things as underdogs. Now, I understand the polls had them even, but as far as actually, like, nobody actually felt like in America, and I'm sure even Trump supporters felt like that the few days before the elections, when it was inevitably going to, the election was naturally coming to an end. And even in Brexit here, I don't think anybody genuinely expected that they would win.
No.
So,
well, Nigel Farage, for instance, he conceded only to unconcede about half an hour later on the 23rd of June.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he basically came out saying, I remember on the night of it, he came out saying, oh, if, the battle hasn't been lost yet. In a kind of like trying to stir up the crowd from, even though we might lose tonight, just remember that, this isn't over. Whenever anyone says that speech, it's not over yet.
Yeah, I would say
you're kind of conceding it.
Yeah, I would also, leaning on from that, I'd sort of like an interesting anecdote or little quirk that, it might be a false pattern I've made in my mind. But did you notice when Donald Trump gave his victory speech afterwards, the song in the background that was playing was like, "You can't always get what you want." It's almost like he had planned to sort of like only narrowly scrape a loss and then be like, "I'm going to come back next time. We're going to keep the momentum going and keep that sort of like that." That fan base there, either to profit from, boost his ego, whatever.
Exactly.
So then it had this sort of like horrible, ironic tone of like saying to Hillary Clinton, "You can't always get what you want," which I thought was a bit like, oh dear. Do you know what I mean? I thought it was a bit like, it was very Farage-esque of almost like conceding then unconceding.
Yeah, and I do also get this vibe. And maybe this is kind of veering off, the kind of type of podcast that we're going to try and become, but that Trump and but I think it's important to put that out there that both Trump and Boris Johnson, who would actually put as the face of Brexit in this country, not Nigel Farage, but Boris Johnson.
That's a good point.
But like both of them, after they win, I think their initial game wasn't to win. They obviously know how to campaign naturally very well, it seems. But they both of them, it seemed to me, had, if I get onto this, if I tap into this reservoir of discontent with the establishment, I can boost myself up with, I can make myself into something much bigger than I currently am.
Yeah.
So for Boris Johnson, my idea was that he wanted to lose closely and then act like, we lost, it was so close, and trust me, if you vote me in, I'll get you Brexit. And so he could become Prime Minister that way. And I kind of get the feeling with Donald Trump that it was not politics that he was kind of rooting for, that if he lost, he'd have swathes of, Trump supporters and people who were like, this guy speaks sense, that he could possibly push into a media empire. Which from the last, few weeks of his presidential election, that the plan was, okay, he's going to lose, but what we can do is the 10 million supporters now, diehards he has, that they would hopefully subscribe to his monthly news channel or media company where he basically, he acts as like a president of. So, and he obviously would make absolutely loads of money doing that. So I kind of get this vibe that these are two naturally charismatic opportunists who've lumped onto something that maybe they don't necessarily want.
I must admit, is calling Donald Trump naturally charismatic? Is that a slight stretch? Slightly. I suppose he might have his own particular appeal. I don't know.
No, I mean, let's be. I guess I've been following this election super closely from the get-go, like the Democratic primaries, and when he was out there. Obviously, when he was saying the things at the beginning, like, Mexicans many Mexicans are rapists and that kind of thing. Like, obviously, I was kind of, oh god, right, okay, fine, roll your eyes, get past that. But in the debates, it was funny watching him take down Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. He basically on a pro. Marco Rubio has a desire to always be thirsty and sweaty, and he just basically went out and started pouring this bottle of water everywhere and just was like, "Look, Rubio," and like it was just there is a
God.
he does get a chuckle out of you, and even though he's maybe not somebody who defines my politics in the slightest, but the guy if the guy can make me laugh, I can see why he'd make other people laugh, and making people laugh. This is maybe where Clinton failed. Is a big deal. Like,
so is that sort of like populist, relatable feel, I suppose, even if he is a billionaire or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, no doubt. And but and again, we'll get onto the similarities of it being to Brexit. But I guess we can slowly now move on to what exactly Trump did to win this election, specifically the things he did. And I guess we are talking about that currently with his charisma. But he was, in my opinion, to a large base of the Republican base, and to a minority of people who, if you ask them about voting, would tell you to go away because they don't listen to us. They've given up on both sides of the electorate. And this is when we're having these conversations, I'm always talking about those Labour voters that have given up from Tony Blair. This is what I'm talking about. These are the type of voters, the people that I talked to when I was working as a bartender. They're the type of people who sit there and they go, both of them don't care about us very much. And I think Trump appealed to those people. And they came out to vote, and the Republican base came out to vote. And for Clinton, the base that she wanted to come out to vote didn't.
No.
So,
or not enough.
Exactly. Basically, the Obama coalition, if she had just gotten that on its own, she would have won. But she didn't even get that.
No.
So I mean, I'd love to get your opinion on why exactly you think Trump won.
Wow. Yeah, it's.
What about Trump? I think is the question. Like, what is it about specifically?
As in Trump as a man? What?
Yeah. Why would someone go out and vote for him? Apart from, I don't think it's good enough to say 47.7% of the American electorate found his racial campaigning as the reason they voted for him. I think there must be a bit more to it.
I don't. I think there's a lot of sort of converging factors that led to Trump's victory. I'd be really, really hesitant to put anything down on simply just like, as some people said, as like it was a white backlash, or it was anti-establishment, or any of these kinds of things, because there's a lot of like lots of different conflicting evidence, or at least what in my opinion as to what might have led to his victory. In terms of Trump the man, it's one of the things that I find so paradoxical, in that he's managed to convince a lot of like perhaps traditional Democratic voters who have been voting Democrat most of their adult life, perhaps Bill Clinton, that this man as a self-proclaimed billionaire, lives in a literal gold tower in New York, has their interests at heart, and he's going to campaign and protect that in the White House. He managed to convince them. Perhaps it wasn't because he had, in a way, anything particularly redeeming about his personality, but just that he was something different. Which I know is such a get out clause of explaining why Trump the man may have won, but it's the only thing really to a degree I can think of is that he talks in a very sort of like unscripted, unstructured manner, and I suppose that's relatable to a lot of people. It's something that a lot of people find appealing. Yeah. How people say Nigel Farage down the pub, Donald Trump down the bar, or whatever. I guess I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, they kind of, and I guess maybe this is obviously you can't talk about Trump winning without maybe how Clinton lost, but I also get the vibe that is a lot of it. Like Trump in a kind of cognitive dissonant way. Whenever he was on television, he spoke like them. He talked like them. I think they're so tired of. Even I am when I'm talking to my friends, and even like someone like you, and I roll my eyes at male privilege, or I roll my eyes at, no, honestly, but I mean, I roll my eyes when I make a joke. I remember being in Bristol and like sitting around a bunch of friends and a bunch of their friends, and me being me, I said a lot of let's just say edgy things, but yeah, let's just say the topic was edgy.
Edgy. Go with edgy. Yeah, go with it.
What I don't, yeah, let's just say that. But I mean, what I don't need is somebody then going up to my girlfriend afterwards and saying your boyfriend's very racist, like,
which I would imagine as a person of colour is arguably difficult to take. In a way. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, especially coming from the person who was coming from was a morbidly obese white feminist. So it just became like, really, like, seriously, is that something that they honestly believe? Like, do they honestly think that because I joke about, and it was mostly jokes about Pakistani people, by the way, just news for people, I am ethnically Pakistani. So that's where the horror of. I think there is a lot of, again, talking to a lot of elderly gentlemen in pubs as a bartender, they are tired of being told that they're racist because they don't think they are, and they get, so when they see Trump going out there and saying, a lot of the times, even for me, someone who rolls his eyes at terms like male privilege and constantly shouting racist and sexist, even for me, genuinely racist things, they just don't care anymore. That they are now muted. The word racist just doesn't hit them anymore. You call them racist, they'll call you a politically correct social justice warrior.
It's complete.
That just does not mean anything.
It's a complete lack of engagement from many in the progressive wing of politics that they may have traditionally voted for. And so then they feel distant from them just on a sort of like emotional human level in terms of connection. They feel like they don't, again, represent them. Very cliche, I know. But Trump in his not his sort of racist or xenophobic way. I don't mean it. Oh, did I just say Trump is racist? I think I might. No. A bit. No, I didn't. No, I didn't mean. Yeah. Anyway,
I think it'd be rude to ignore that at times he has spilled on white nationalism, which
definitely.
I guess,
definitely.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like
he's pandered to it at least. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean his voters are voting explicitly for that, and I think that's the.
No, I don't think so. No, I think not all of them
are that. Exactly, and not all of them are that tuned into his politics. So if you got to them and say, "Oh, did you hear about that time Trump tweeted a white nationalist tweet?" Like, these are 50, 60, 70. We're talking about a swathe of the electorate who probably aren't on Twitter.
I don't even think he's that tuned into his politics. To be fair, I think he yeah. One thing I did want to talk about is a lot of what's been mentioned in the reasons given for Trump's victory, certainly in the wake of it, at least, or it's at least increased, is the concept of an anti-globalization vote. Which has seen a lot of airtime in the BBC have been doing it everywhere you look. Question Time. Washington Post, New York Times, wherever there is this vote, and I think it raises a lot of interesting questions about the future direction of politics, or at least what those people were voting for. So a lot of people say that it's a sort of an economic vote. It's a vote about being left behind, and this is to a degree the Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn argument, isn't it? And to a degree, this has some merit. So I found an interesting stat. I believe this was an article from the Washington Post that a guy called Matt O'Brien quoted it. And it essentially suggests that people between the 75th and 85th percentile of global income distribution, in other words, the white working class of the Western world, are the only people since 1988 to actually have seen a net decrease in their levels of income. Only people in the world. So, everyone else, white middle class in Western countries, sub-Saharan Africans, especially the Chinese as well, with the manufacturing boom they've gone through in the past 30 years, have all benefited from closer economic ties and opening up of borders in terms of trade. So it kind of makes sense that these people would vote for Trump for an anti-trade, sort of slightly xenophobic rhetoric. But there's an issue in that I believe the median income of a Trump supporter was $70,000 a year, which is huge. I mean, you're not poor. You're not in that 75th to 85th percentile if you're earning that. Obviously, there will be some people that voted for that kind of like anti-economic globalization thing. But one sort of problem that I think a lot of people on the left are uncomfortable to talk about is the sort of like ethno-cultural aspect of the Trump vote. And I mean that in terms of a cultural resistance to globalization. I wonder if a lot of white Americans may be sort of not scared, but apprehensive or feel a lack of control into the changing cultural makeup, the increasing Latinization of their country. Which, if you look at it like that, it starts to make sense why a lot of right politicians, rather than left politicians such as Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn, are gaining traction. And that's because the parties on the left can speak, especially the Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders left, can speak to a lot of people economically in terms of state intervention, workers' rights, making sure there's fair pay for fair work. But they can't speak to them culturally in terms of reducing immigration because of its cultural impacts, or at least perceived cultural impacts, because the American economy has actually been doing incredibly well. So it's very difficult, I think, to because it would be very easy to characterize the Trump vote as an anti-globalization economic vote, because I think for people on the left, it's much easier to deal with it like that than if it's sort of like an ethno-cultural resistance vote against the increasing like changing cultural makeup of America, which is something when I was reading up for the research on this podcast, it's something that I found really, really convincing, if I'm honest with you, just on a personal level.
No, I would almost agree. And also the left, I think once gay marriage passed, I think the left kind of looked around and said, started to put their hands in their pockets and went, so what do we do next? And I guess we kind of just said, yeah, transgender rights. That seems like the one we're going to have to fight in the Western world. Like, gay marriage kind of, once America passed it, I swear just kind of like there was a firestorm of other countries in the Western area.
Trump still gets to appoint a couple of judges, so maybe...
Yeah, no, of course. But I also do think that I think he's surprisingly less homophobic than a typical Republican candidate was. Did he mention it at all?
I think you might have a point. I think to a certain degree, it's that he's a bit ambivalent about it, because I remember I watched a documentary with Rich Hall on BBC iPlayer that was about I know he's actually incredibly funny about the changing nature, the nature of elections in America. And one of the things he said was, like, the Democrats and Republicans are essentially the same. They may argue over, like, spending cuts here and there, how much to spend on, like, healthcare or whatever, but they're essentially the same. Apart from Republicans just cannot help but, like, be interested in what you do in your private life. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're always interested in, like, all abortions, gay rights, like, no gay marriage, all that kind of stuff. Whereas Trump doesn't seem to be... part of me wonders if he sort of says it on the campaign trail to appeal to that Republican socially conservative base, but he was a Democrat until the 90s. Has he had that severe of a change of heart from his upbringing? I don't know.
I genuinely, I don't think, maybe honestly I don't want to get the Trump supporters all angry, but I think his opinion on it is that he just doesn't care. So I mean, I guess if he had to come out there and say, if let's say his polling went down the roof and the white working class was like, you said you'd be change, I guess maybe he'd then be like, don't worry guys, I'll repeal gay marriage. I remember Trump at the convention, he said he kind of tried to get, it seemed like to me, there was definitely a moment in that convention, if you go back and listen to it, that he was like, we're also going to support our LGBT community. And a classic Republican audience, it didn't. So I mean,
I can imagine that went down like a fucking
exactly,
sack of
but
shit. To be honest,
in a strange way, because they were so used to clapping to everything Trump said, there was like a natural reaction to clap to it. That they kind of realised, hold on, we're the party of not liking this, and so he got like a half clap, and then he basically said, "See, look how amazing these people are. Look how far we've come along." And it was the strangest moment, because he basically pushed the Republican Party to accept gay marriage, not gay marriage, but to just, hey, let's not be the party of gay hating, you know.
I definitely think it'll be interesting, yeah, to see how he reacts to that. I mean, it depends what kind of Supreme Court judge he nominates, because he said he wants to do one in the vein of like the recently deceased judge, but I think him himself. I think sometimes he'll say things, and you're a bit like, sorry, are you actually a Republican? I mean, obviously he's not a traditional Republican, but you think like, sorry, are you in the Republican Party? Like, I think he made some comments about like the bathroom bill in North Carolina, about how, oh yeah, it's not good, it's bad for business. Like, let's come on, you know, it's not a necessary thing. Like, let's all just get along, hold hands or whatever. And I remember reading that and just being like, what on earth is it? Like, where has this come from? Like, it's so strange.
Yeah, I just think he realizes it's also it's a really politically. It's not a winner. It's not a winner at all. Like, imagine if he does appoint supreme judges that block gay marriage. This happens when progressives get into power and they institute things. Most people actually quite like those things. Like, for instance, Obamacare, you know, Republicans fought it for years. But actually, he came out in his first week and said he wouldn't repeal it, because if you do take people's healthcare away from them, it doesn't matter which party they're from, they will dislike you.
Yeah, and he'd at least like keep some elements, I think.
Exactly. And with gay marriage, I think now gay people have gotten married, and they're now happy with the fact that they've reached that point with the law. If you take that away from them, they're now going to be way more politically incensed. Imagine if somebody came out and said halfway through your marriage, oh, it's not real. Oh, by the law, it doesn't count. Like, that's just going to inflame. That will give the Democratic Party something to swing around and be perfectly united on. Like, oh, let's fight this. So I just think it's for him. He's not daft. It's, you know, in some ways he can be, but I think he's wise to the fact. He understands how liberal America works, and just accepting or just in slapping in the face gay marriage kind of would lose him everything. So, on the next 4 years if he wants it. But
I think it would certainly tarnish any reputation, or I think it would certainly tarnish any attempts to reach out to liberal America in terms of
exactly. But also give them something really easy to slap him with whenever they want to run a political campaign against him.
Is that it was a bit like with Theresa May when she announced the grammar schools thing, and it was like Jeremy Corbyn's like only good PMQs, like bashing her on it.
Exactly, yeah, 100%. And again, it's because it allowed even those members on his side of the bench who don't like him to cheer him when he said these things. And it allows you to unify a party. Currently, the Democrats are in a place where they're like, you know, the Clinton base and the Sanders base. And you've got to find somebody who's going to run those two parties. But I mean, just going back to my original point about gay marriage, it seems like to me that working class Democratic vote and the Republican vote, they accepted gay marriage. They accepted, you know, I mean, before that, I guess, the blacks' right to, you know, African American rights to get vote, and women, you know, women's right to get votes. But those wars were won with time. You know, it took time. Obviously, you know, the right to get the vote for African Americans, you know, that took 100 years. You know, the women's right took about the same time. Gay marriage took about, I think, you know, since the campaign really got into gear, it took about 30 years, maybe 20 years. But since then, progressives have basically gone, oh yeah, transgender rights, and a whole host of different things like different genders in between genders, and then basically gone to Republicans and gone, please accept this. Republicans have gone, no, because most of them, you know, are people who are much older who are like, what are you talking about? What do you mean non-binary genders? Or what do you mean you're sort of a woman and sort of not? And they're confused. And when they're confused and outright reject it, we get angry at them. Or not we, but I mean liberal lefts gets super angry at them, and they're like, "Whoa, why are you hating me for disliking transgenderism or not understanding it?" Progressivism is won after taking a lot of time to explain to people why that argument should be the new normal. But I kind of feel like we've come up with, in the last 5-10 years, a whole section of sociology and science, and are expecting the whole country to come along. And if they're not, they're racist, they're sexist, and they're a whole lot of misogynist. So I think that's the point I'm trying to make. That basically, the left doesn't know how to talk to the working class and the Republicans, or the right wing.
So, do you think then that at least plays partly into the reason as to why Hillary lost?
Yeah, well, sort of, yes. It just allowed working class Democrats this new bunch of voters Trump kind of appealed to just not care about the liberal left, because the liberal left really doesn't have a product, a cultural product that they care about.
No, exactly. And that's definitely something I buy into personally.
Yeah. I mean, what is 5 years ago when Obama was running for election, you could tell he was for gay marriage, even though he came out with his black priest and was like, "Oh, I'm not." He was, and but the thing is, is there a big issue that the left is running on in this election? Was there?
What?
We'll legalize this. We'll make this
in terms
marijuana.
of what was the dominating issue in this election?
I think, the thing that we will legalize, the thing that we will pass. Was there anything?
Well, they say Hillary essentially ran the campaign on "Don't elect me because I'm not Donald Trump."
Yeah,
and
also, I'll be the first woman president, which is not a reason to vote someone. It may be to some people, but I just don't expect people to vote for you just because you're a woman.
I don't think it was particularly wrong of her to play that, just on the basis that it would have been a historic thing. I mean, she already did make history in being the first female head of the ticket in a presidential election for a major party. That is, which I think that should be commended as a step forward in itself.
No, I agree. But my point is that it didn't fit. When Barack Obama was running for president, you kind of felt like, this junior senator from Chicago, you kind of got this vibe that this is authentic, this is real, this is a transcendental moment in American politics, that they could elect a very cool, charismatic black guy. When Hillary Clinton ran, she basically said, "Vote me, I'll be the first woman president." Now, to obviously some people, that's an appeal, and that's maybe a reason to go out there and do it. But it felt like she was latching. It didn't feel like she was running from the get-go. It didn't feel... And I guess this is where the word authentic comes in, even though maybe it doesn't make any sense. It just didn't seem really why she was running. Do you know what I mean? I know it sounds kind of difficult to really articulate, but I don't think she was doing this for other women. I think she was doing it because she wanted to do it. This is the vibe the right, I think, got away from it. Not me.
So you essentially, are you sort of suggesting that you essentially feel that she was,
She played the woman card.
See,
and I'm not saying that's necessarily I'm not saying that that's what everybody should believe. It's what the right believed she was doing, or the centre even. There was lots of people when she was coming out saying, "Vote for me, and together, women can break the glass ceiling." Don't blackmail your voters into doing something.
I think that may have been a feature perhaps slightly earlier on in her campaign, but I don't particularly. I think she was right. I personally think she got the balance correct in terms of her gender and how that was it's a bonus, it's a plus, but it's not why she's running. It's not why you should elect her. I personally felt she actually got the tone right for that, because I think there's a feature perhaps earlier on in her campaign, but from what I remember, in terms of election issues, really, she lost it in those swing states because at the end of the day, it wasn't really. You could argue her policy was the same old, because it is important to note that she has won the popular vote, and by the time we find out the full results from states, she may well have won it by a good few 100,000 votes, possibly even 1 million, which is a problem for another day, or a discussion for another day. So she didn't. So Hillary lost because she lost in places. Perhaps this is over. It sounds quite simplistic when I say it, but she lost in places where she needed to win, and she didn't have the right chemistry in order to win in those Rust Belt states, and arguably maybe Florida, North Carolina. I think you mentioned a point about the unfavorability of the candidates. They're both like the most unfavorable candidates that have ever contested a US election.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's really difficult to pinpoint a proper reason why she lost. She may well simply have just lost for the reason that she was campaigning. She was the right candidate. She lost because she wasn't Trump.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why she lost.
I'm not sure I completely agree because it's so if we I guess the point I'm trying to get to is voting her in didn't feel like, I think, for a lot of the voters, a transformational moment, and I don't think it worked.
No.
It didn't even appeal to the women who voted for Trump that getting this woman into the White House would be a big moment for women. I don't think they felt that. Evidently, they didn't feel that because they came out to vote for Trump in almost a typical rate Republicans tend to. Like if you look at the Republican and male-woman split, usually more men do come out to vote for Republican candidates, and usually it's less women. And I think, what was it? Even though Clinton won most of the, altogether most of the women, white women.
She won
white
women, but she did not win white women, yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, if you think that she was going to appeal to a portion of the electorate, it would be white women, would it not?
Yes. You'd imagine so, wouldn't you? But arguably,
they didn't buy
it. But they, to be fair, I mean, they broke in quite large numbers, especially college-educated women, suburban women for Mitt Romney in 2012. And yeah,
No, I'm not saying they can't vote Republican. It's just in an election where she was, in my eyes, her main product was, as a woman, let's break down this glass ceiling. I mean, apart from that, there was no policy that kind of came out of her campaign that was like, again, this is what I'm saying, she was running on essentially nothing but I'm a woman. This is what a lot of the electorate heard. Not necessarily, I'm not saying it's true. Maybe. Exactly. That's what I'm saying, perception. It's not, that's all that matters.
But whenever you heard people interviewed on the streets, Hillary's gender never came up. It was basically just like, we don't want to vote for Hillary because she's corrupt. She won't do shit all about immigration, and we want change.
No, I'm arguing the opposite of that point. I'm arguing that you're right. Her gender didn't matter at all, and I'm surprised that it didn't. Because I guess it's very easy if you're a black person to get behind Barack Obama because African Americans are typically left-leaning, and so when Obama comes out, he naturally speaks their language. But I think Clinton was trying to do the same thing with white women, but because they're so politically diverse, a lot of them just didn't feel it. And also on top of that, I don't think she particularly did the job very well, and so I guess the other end of that is, those women, instead of just not turning out, they just decided. 42% of them decided to go for a guy who's been who like only a month before the election day was found talking about sexually assaulting women, allegedly.
Yeah,
that's how little she made them care about this transcendental moment in politics. Her brand was just ugh, to a lot of them.
But I feel to be honest, it would have been a lose-lose for her because you're criticising.
I'm not
her
saying she should run on it.
No,
I'm saying
no.
she did a bad job of using it.
Yes, well, you're almost criticising her for almost not playing the gender card enough or correctly. But what would have happened if she had played it arguably?
I don't think she should have used it at all. I think she did it a lot.
No, I don't know. I don't think she did. I really don't think she did. I don't think the narrative of the campaign was really constructed around her gender. Yes, there were tidbits about it, and it was a reason for women to go out and vote, and indeed progressive men. But I really don't feel it was like it wasn't the be all and end all of our campaign. There were other bigger reasons as to why she lost. For instance, I don't know if you saw it, but loads of newspapers, both in the UK and the US, were reporting that Hillary herself essentially blamed her election lost on James Comey and the emails saga that unfolded once again a week before the election. I mean, I don't know if that's something I'll provide. I wonder if there were slightly wider issues than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is one reason I should say.
No, I get that. No, I think what I'm trying to make the point is if you're somebody who is, if you're somebody who's going to turn out to vote for Hillary Clinton on a day that maybe you typically don't turn out to vote, or that you typically vote Republican, Hillary Clinton's message to those people was that she would go up on that podium, she would say, drivel for most part. She would say, if you listened very carefully, you'd hear paid family leave, which is, I guess, not a bad one. Vacations guaranteed. And if you really paid attention, sometimes, she would say she would overturn Citizens United, which may appeal. And then she'd also say, at the end, let's break this glass ceiling down. Like, all the other stuff she said, they've heard politicians say before. So her brand, the new gimmick to her brand was, and in my opinion, to a lot of people, that I'm a woman and so you should vote for me because of that. Like, what else was she running on that stood out? Nothing. Was there anything else? And that's my point. So if all your brand is, the only thing that makes you stand out compared to the last person who ran was, but I'm a woman, that just didn't do it for especially women who you thought would have come out to vote for her. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was not a positive campaign in terms of reasons to vote for Hillary rather than against Trump.
Exactly,
and to a certain degree, that comes again with her blaming the sort of like the thing on Comey for losing the election. She said that she couldn't construct a positive end to the campaign, which is arguably a strategic failure on her part for not trying to perhaps do so more on the anti-Trump thing and on the anti-Trump thing. Especially, you can almost contrast her or compare her campaign with Remain, and that Remain was perceived as too negative, and we lost.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can argue the same thing about Hillary.
And also both of those elections, you kind of got this almost mournful feeling that maybe we should have turned out to vote a little bit more on the left side of things. Like, again, a surprising lack of turnout in both of those elections for the kind of like left-leaning, like Scotland, for instance. This was America, for instance, Brexit. There was this almost... it was a popular vote at the end of the day. And there was this feeling that, Scotland hasn't turned out significantly.
You didn't know.
Exactly. So I kind of got this feeling that even the left, the people you expected to turn out to vote for those institutions, Remain, Clinton, the establishment in a sense, because both of those things essentially ran on same old. They weren't even, a significant amount of them just weren't very enthused.
No.
Exactly. So, I'm not sure, when people say Trump won because of a white lash, Trump won, that's a factor, I guess. There's definitely a surprising element of white nationalism streak, and also like you're saying, an anti-globalization streak, which is, if you're part of that, doesn't necessarily mean you're a racist. It just means that that's how you feel. Or that's your perception. But there's also, on the other side of things, is the left has become what people perceive as leftist politics, even though to a significant amount of leftists it's not left enough at all. That's become the norm. That's become the establishment. And we've got to get away from that. And to the people on the left, they don't turn out to vote. And the people on the right, they're so desperate for change that they will turn out to vote and they'll vote the other guy.
I don't even think I don't even think it was that much just people on the right. I think it was just people. Well, I think one of the things in America, of course, is that actually in the post-World War II era, it's really, really unheard of for an incumbent party to hold the White House for a third term. And I think that, again, may just play a part in it, and that people in those swing states, it's sort of, despite the vulgarity of Trump's campaign, that desire, that routine desire for change, sort of then converged with the anti-globalization vote, the white lash vote, and it tipped him over the edge in to a certain degree. If he was running in 2012, he would have lost quite badly, in my view. Just because the factors weren't yet there for him to actually springboard to a victory. And remember on election night where we sort of said everything's going to have to go right for him to win, and it did. The factors that might convince people to vote for Trump convince the people in the states that matter to vote for Trump, both in terms of anti-globalization, routine desire for change, to a certain degree, the ethno-cultural resistance to globalization, the white lash to a degree as well. All of these things all added together.
But I'm also adding as a factor a pretty unappealing establishment, which a pretty unappealing campaign, because it's an
Hillary is I necessarily don't think it's a bad thing to be the archetypal politician, but she is the archetypal politician.
Exactly. And I think she's so signified establishment politics.
She has that perception.
Yeah, I mean, could there be any? I think what's his name? Forgotten the Guardian journalist who wrote that she's a liberal royalist, and it was the perfect term, I think, to sum her up. That she's liberal royalty, like she's a Clinton. So, I mean, in fact, she has been the main Clinton for the last 8 years in politics, because Bill's pretty much stayed out of it for the most part. So
he's just been doing his own thing.
Exactly. So that's the point I'm trying to make. Like, even her main product, like her main slogans and all those things, they just like, I'll just sit here and roll my eyes.
Do you think Bernie would have won?
I think that's so hypothetical that I don't like when people say
he was close. He wasn't that far away from the Democratic nomination. If you take the DNC,
I would have liked to see him against Trump, because that would have been fun. But
the polling was suggesting
and also
he would have done better.
Of course, but I also feel like, I would prefer to see Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump personally myself, but because for personal reasons, and also because I kind of like his politics, but also because he's, I think, significantly more charismatic than Hillary Clinton is. He's a different product for the Democrats to lead towards, or have to center self around, because it's really hard to run as, like you say, the establishment. That doesn't appeal to anybody, because especially if that establishment is not popular. But I think that's the problem. Sam Harris wrote about that. Bernie Sanders would have been open to a wide swathe of attack from the Republicans about how much of a socialist he is and all those kind of things. The Republican machine would have had a lot of fun time to deal with her, to deal with such a candidate. I don't think the Republican machine had a lot for Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump did. But I don't think, if Jeb Bush was running against Hillary Clinton, I think this election would have been, I think Hillary would have probably won it.
Arguably, yes, because she may well have won those. She may well have won those Rust Belt states.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, that's my point. I mean,
I think it definitely depends more personally on the reason why Hillary lost. The reason why the Democrats lost much more on the Republican nominee than it does, whether if they selected Bernie, I personally believe they still would have lost. Basically, because yes, Bernie can appeal to the Rust Belt states and arguably maybe some Floridians, like economically speaking, he can be a state interventionist like Trump, but he can't speak to them culturally. He can't say your ethnocultural backlash, your dislike of immigrants, your xenophobia. He can't say to them that's okay.
Yeah.
He can't appeal to that nature, and which is why I think Trump. He appealed to both those Rust Belt state voters, economically and culturally, socially even, and that's it. And then that was enough. And that was enough for him to completely blindside the Democratic establishment, the media, pretty much most political commentators. If you want to include us as commentators, I don't know if I would stretch that far, but definitely us. I had no idea he was going to be able to win Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. I thought Hillary had all three of them in the bag just because of historical precedent, and that went out the window.
No, of course, but also, I guess the main story of this lecture, when you look at the returning exit polls, which are usually they're returning exit polls in America, apparently. I think exit polls in this country are quite respected, but in America, they're not at all.
Yeah, I remember listening to that on the BBC, and they were giving them a lot of crap, they're not reliable, and evidently they weren't, because the exit polls were saying Hillary's going to win, which you could argue is probably just more polling failure. Just sort of brushed it under the carpet, more polling failure. Yeah, it's fine.
But it was a really close election, which I guess they probably would have more respect if they were kind of honest with that. Like, it's closer than you think. Then they would have got away with it. But they go so like Hillary's going to win that kind of was inevitable. So, but I think I've maybe lost the original point I was talking about.
Well, you wanted to talk about a silver lining. Is one of my subheadings here I've got on my notes. So,
sure. But
I'll let you crack on with that.
Okay.
For now,
a silver lining, I guess, for this election is, I guess, if you were to look at how this, I was thinking about this earlier. If Bernie Sanders was elected, he'd have to have won via a landslide, because the Republicans would have just done what they did with Obama, and they would have said, "We're going to obstruct this person from day one," and he would have had nothing passed if it was a close election. He would have been able to do anything. And again, this is one of the original. If we could just slightly backtrack back to why Trump won, maybe even this point, I think gets lost, and is a very important point. Republican obstructionism of Barack Obama worked.
It's amazing how much Obama has actually managed to do, even with the Republicans being against him for 6 years.
Exactly. But one of the main things I think we get from this is Obama was actually, I think if you were to get the electorate, the left wing and right wing scale, Clinton's standing in centre, maybe centre right. Obama's centre left. And then there's, I guess, in that equal distance, it's Bernie Sanders. I think that's who Obama really is. I think he's more left than he kind of left on.
If you want to put it on a British political British political spectrum, Bernie Sanders is basically just Ed Miliband, but bald.
Yeah.
And older.
Actually,
in terms of policy,
I would actually.
That's the comparison.
Yeah, no, actually, I would. I guess if you were to apply that to an American standard using British politicians, I would have Bernie.
He might as well be Lenin, yeah.
Corbyn. Yeah, no. He's Jeremy Corbyn. I would have Obama as Ed Miliband, and I'd have Clinton as Tony Blair. And what I'm saying is, Obama would have been far more left wing had he had the Republicans not block him at every point. His ideal America would be considerably more left wing than Clinton made out.
Which I imagine if you are a Trump supporter and you're listening to this podcast, and for some reason still listening to it, then you'd probably be quite glad the Republicans obstructed him for 6 years.
No, I wouldn't say. I wouldn't exactly even make that specific point. So don't go away, Trump supporters. I like every view. But the important point is this. For instance, if Obama wanted to pass an infrastructure bill, which would have put more working class people back to work, he couldn't get it passed, and so no wonder working class Democrats or working class people in general felt like the establishment was doing nothing for them at all. When if Obama wanted to, and he has insisted that he wanted to pass a big infrastructure bill in the past, he couldn't. So the story that came away to working class Democrats after 8 years of Obama is, I don't need more of that because they do nothing for us. When actually, Obama was trying really hard to pass an infrastructure bill, would have loved to have passed one, but realised that would go nowhere in the Congress or in the Senate.
Good old Paul Ryan doing his best to uphold American values.
Yeah.
Good old Paul.
Economic conservatism that just is.
Well, this is one of the things as well. I mean, I don't know if I can personally count this as a silver lining, but I'll give it a go. This is a fun fact for you, actually. I don't know if you know this. Do you know the last time the Republicans had the White House, House of Representatives, and Senate? Do you know what year that was?
I always kind of got the idea that they always win it back at some point of midterm.
Have a guess when they had they had all three of them last 3 times.
Oh, all 3 of them.
House of Representatives, Senate, and White House, where the Republicans controlled.
I thought they were pretty good at winning the Congresses and the.
Go on, guess the year. Guess the year. Where they had the President, Senate, and House of Representatives.
I would assumed it would have been under Bush, but seeing as you're asking this as some sort of like, guess question.
Oh, that's great.
I imagine it's going back considerably further. So, Reagan?
Nah, a little bit further.
Oh, kind of lose my American presidents, like in that Nixon.
It was not Nixon. I'm gonna tell. It wasn't even Eisenhower. I'm gonna tell you. It was, I believe, under Herbert Hoover in 1928.
Wow.
And obviously, we all know what happened in 1929. Yeah. So essentially,
yeah.
That was just a little digression there for a brilliantly fun fact, which I loved. Hopefully, I don't hope Trump and the Republicans are going to cause another Great Depression. Let's fingers crossed about that. But a lot of these Republicans, traditional economic conservatives, they're going to block a lot of his spending plans. So on a personal
I don't think
level,
they can.
What do you mean? Why not?
They just won't. I don't think they. This is the main. This is there is a silver lining.
It's sort of the source of their votes is now
Trump.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, these are Paul Ryan, Marco Rubio, all people who acted horrified at the release of hashtag Pussygate.
They thought they were going to lose.
Exactly. But they couldn't remove themselves from saying they would vote for him. They just said they wouldn't endorse him because in the long run they think that would be good enough to present to the public when they run for president. That I wasn't okay with it. I didn't endorse his actions, because I didn't endorse him. But they voted for him, and they even came out publicly saying that they voted for him. So they realised that Trump kind of owns that party. So if there is a genuine silver lining to this, is that Democrats are happy to work for, I know people like to say this, you're shilling for the Democrats here. But I mean, in general, if Trump wants to pass an infrastructure bill, I think the Democrats will work with him to pass it. If Obama wants to pass something for the working class or for their voters, they don't even want to pass anything with him.
Could you imagine that, like Bernie Sanders and Trump working together on some sort of like infrastructure spending bill? It'd be funny if they actually sort of worked together on some sort of infrastructure bill. I don't know the likelihood of it happening. But my thing is that like Paul Ryan, he's such a traditional economic conservative, in the true mold of the Republican Party. And is he really going to green light something that I don't know, say a $12 billion border wall? I think that is going to be something he's going to look at. He's going to get it on his bit of paper. He's going to be like, that is quite a lot of money. That is quite excessive.
I think this is the thing. I don't think Trump cares about that border wall that much. So I mean, I think he'll pass some sort of measure which, like. I did
see a newspaper quote before we went live that I think he might have said in an interview to CNN. He said 2 things. One, that he's going to deport 3 million people basically straight away, but also that number 2, the wall is going to be or could be, and I quote, partially a fence.
Yeah,
which exactly. I was like, interesting semantics there.
No, that's the thing. I think he's going to come up with something that he can essentially turn up to the electorate and go, see, sort of did it. And I think that's how he's going to do it. Of course, he's not going to suspend. It will not be, a Game of Thrones-esque wall, going across the border. It's just too long. And so it's just I don't think he's going to do that. However, this is the point I was trying to make, the silver lining. So if Bernie Sanders won, he'd have to have won by a landslide.
Definitely.
If to do anything because of Republican obstructionism. If Hillary Clinton wins, this is why I think she's a centrist and why I think she had fracking in her electoral mandate. Like in a not her mandate, but a manifesto. That she would essentially have fracking. I think her game is she brings in certain things Republicans want, and she basically puts it in front of them and goes, what will you give me for that? So she would go fracking. Obviously, the Republicans will want to work on it. Democrats generally will not want to work on it. And she basically puts that in front of the Republicans and goes fracking. And because Republicans are owned by their corporate donors, the corporate donors will tell the Republicans, we want to do fracking. So she gets... So Clinton, in her mind, goes, okay, I'm going to give up fracking in this country for ideally paid leave and basically make a deal that way. You give the other side what they want, you give them what they want, you get what you want. So it's the politics of compromise. But essentially, for Clinton, it's important to have things that Republicans want. And fracking is one. So that's how centrists usually get compromise. They get what the other side wants. Sanders has to win by a landslide. Trump he's in a position where his whole party is now based around him. So they have to do, to a large extent, what he says. Now, obviously, if he says,
he's now the leader. He is de jure leader. He's now de jure leader of the Republican Party. That's its most highly elected official. No.
Of course, but I mean, also in a way of like, for political expediency. You're allowed to disagree with your leader every now and then and not expect to get kicked out by your own voters at the next election or governorship race. But they have to be different politicians to the ones they were before if Trump is genuinely going to reach out to working class voters. And that's my point. So a silver lining is an infrastructure bill could be passed under what do you call it, Trump. That probably wouldn't be passed by Bernie Sanders because I don't think he would have won by a landslide.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point in that there is potential for Trump to do good things, and we shouldn't. Like Hillary Clinton said in her concession speech, we do probably need to give him a chance. Like myself, I'm particularly worried about his foreign policy stances for obvious reasons. So you never know; he may well start to become a lot more sensible in his foreign policy. That'd be good. That'd be a silver lining for me.
No, I agree. Well, I think foreign policy is a conversation for another day.
Yes, so I'm not going to bore everyone now with it.
All right. Well, thanks, Ryan. I'm glad you came in. I think the first episode didn't go as badly as we thought, and just would like to thank everybody for tuning in. And we're going to try and do this podcast every week. Hopefully, get into UK politics mainly, because I think that gets very, very ignored in the large base of things, especially since we are British. We do like this. If you haven't noticed with our accents. So hopefully next week we can get back to maybe some UK politics, and if not, if Jeremy Corbyn continues to just be frustratingly annoying in a House of Commons, we'll get back to UK and US foreign policy in the face of changing political scene. Well, anything else you want to say, Ryan?
No, just hopefully I was tolerable.
Alright, well, please leave some comments below in the comment section. We'd love to read what you've got to say about the podcast. I understand the voice quality and sound quality of this may be strange at times, so I'd like to apologise for that. We'll try and clear that up in the future as the podcast goes on. Thanks again. Thank you very much for listening, and take care. See you next week.